Hey, fellow grad students, this is Lisa Glover, and I'm sitting here in rainy North Carolina tonight. In the book, Women of the American Revolution, Elizabeth Elliot takes a look at numerous women who use their various gifts and skills and God-given abilities to shape the war for independence. My personal favorite, though, is a North Carolinian, and her name is Mary Slocum. Mrs. Slocum was a staunch patriot when she first comes to the public's attention. In some accounts, she is only 16 years old. She marries another patriot by the name of Ezekiel Slocum, who will soon become a colonel in the militia in North Carolina. In February 1776, the Highlander Tories in North Carolina were organizing to head to Wilmington in support of the British troops that were there. Colonel Slocum, on the other hand, was a patriot, and he was planning on joining Colonel Caswell's army, whose job it was to stop the Highlanders from reaching Wilmington. The night before the battle was going to take place, Mrs. Slocum had a horrible nightmare, and she saw her husband lying on the ground, dying and covered in blood. She immediately jumped out of bed, got on her horse, and rode more than 60 miles towards Moores Creek, where the battle was taking place. She arrived shortly after the conclusion of the battle and saw the Patriot and Tory armies, their bodies strewn over the battlefield. But what gave her pause is when she looked and she saw her husband's coat, which was bloodied and covering a man on the ground. She immediately ran over there, thinking the worst, that her nightmare had come true. But when she lifted the coat, she saw that it wasn't her husband, but there was a man who was gravely injured. He asked her for water, and she went and got her gourd and gave him water. This same gourd that she used is on display at the North Carolina Museum of History. After she assisted that man, she moved around the field helping others, both Tories and Patriots, who were injured and needing medical assistance. As with many stories of women's involvement in the Revolutionary War, this one also has an oral tradition. However, according to Elliot, the original story actually came from Mary Slocum's doctor, who heard her tell the story himself. According to the Journal of the American Revolution, though, primary sources for women for this time period are hard to come by. They believe it's partially because in North Carolina there were no newspapers in the state for many years to come, and the letters that may have not been written would have been really hard-pressed to survive the burning of the homes that occurred by the Tories in our area. Mrs. Slocum is not mentioned in any of the official battlefield records. However, as I said earlier, the oral tradition for the story is quite strong. This monument was actually erected in her honor at Moores Creek battlefield. This incident at Moores Creek was not the only time Mrs. Slocum proved her dedication to the Patriot cause. Later in the war, Colonel Tarleton and his soldiers used her plantation house as their headquarters. Mrs. Slocum, however, calmly let them know that the only land in these United States that will ever remain in the possession of a British officer will measure 6 feet by 2. According to Elliot, who recounted this story, Tarleton was so impressed with Mrs. Slocum's bravery and wit and intelligence and hospitality that when it was time to move his officers, he placed a rear guard at her plantation until everyone else had left to ensure that she and her property would not be harassed. Using biblical principles to evaluate Mary Slocum's actions, this is a woman who demonstrated love and courage that was worthy of emulation. She loved her husband enough to risk her own life for him, and she showed what it means to love your neighbor when she helped all who were injured on the battlefield, no matter which side they fell on the political spectrum. She served with hospitality and kindness and impartiality. She was fearless in the face of danger. This was a woman who was not afraid to speak her mind or act in accord with her beliefs.